Fantastic, Rita. Well, I thought that last character was a Titania McGrath creation, some satirical Democrat there. And I'm delighted to say, of course, we have for you on Outsiders a great treat. Andrew Doyle, the creator of Titania McGrath herself, one of the great satirists. We know that the left cannot understand humour and they cannot tolerate humour, so they keep trying to censor it. Andrew's made a great career out of poking fun at the insanity of the left. He lives in London, but he joins us now here on Outsiders. Titania McGrath, or may I call you Andrew Doyle? Welcome back to Outsiders. How are you?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, first off, let's just kick off the great news that Titania McGrath has a new book coming out in a couple of weeks. Tell Outsiders what it is and where they should get it.
So, Titania McGrath's written a children's book. This is her second book, and it's called My First Little Book of Intersectional Activism. And, of course, it's because there's been an absolute rash of these woke children's books that's been flooding the market, and they're doing very well. And she wants to get a piece of that, basically. But she loves this idea of basically indoctrinating the next generation. And that is, you know, there's a serious side to that because, unfortunately, a lot of the proponents of woke culture are doing precisely that. And they're aiming a lot of what they do at children. So there is something quite serious and a bit sinister about it, but I also thought the best way to tackle that is to make fun of it, ultimately.
Well, as I said, Andrew, the left can't stand laughter, they can't stand satire, they don't understand it, but they know it hurts them. Their answer is cancel culture. We've talked about that a lot on this show, but their answer to satire and humour is to just remove them altogether rather than counter them with better jokes or better humour. They simply remove them. You've been removed many times from various platforms. You are a victim of cancel culture repeatedly. Tell us about it. Tell us how it happens and what you're doing about it.
So particularly on Twitter, I've been suspended, I think, about 8 or 9 times now. And what normally happens is my account just disappears and I don't get any message. And then I send multiple messages and eventually there's a bit of a backlash and the account just reappears again. And there's never any transparency about that. But that's sort of the way that the major social network platforms work, isn't it? They don't really have transparency, so it's a bit shady. You don't know what's going on. I mean, Quillette did a study about the way in which accounts that mock the left and certainly the social justice movement tend to get targeted more. Remember that Twitter in particular, but Facebook as well, they employ thousands of people to monitor content and they can arbitrarily delete things that they just don't approve of. I mean, that's the way it works. And you might say, well, yes, it's a private company, they can do what they want. And I do agree with that. But on the other hand, whenever they're sued for content that appears on their platform, they say, yes, but we're just a platform, we're not a publisher. Well, you can't have it both ways, can you? So either you take responsibility for what's on your platform and or you let people say whatever they want. You know, Twitter used to call itself the free speech wing of the free speech party. I don't see them using rhetoric like that anymore.
Rita.
Oh, no. And it wasn't just yourself. You've got hundreds of thousands of followers. There was quite a backlash and they've reinstated you, but there was quite a few other satirical accounts that poke fun at identity politics. And one of my favourites, Jarvis Dupont, he's disappeared, he's gone. But I want to ask you about this White Fragility book that's made its way into some schools. It's like a Bible for the woke. And I want to understand what the fascination with it is, because the author, if she is to be believed, if her own words are to be believed, is a virulent racist. She seems to have some serious issues. So why are we listening to her?
And that's not something that you're ascribing to her. I know the word racist is used very flippantly, very promiscuously. She says that she's a racist, but this is a book by Robin DiAngelo, who's an American sociologist and whiteness studies scholar. This book suddenly shot to the bestseller list in America and the UK after the George Floyd killing. And I suppose it was people trying to understand what's going on. Unfortunately, this is a book. It's called White Fragility. And the basic thesis of the book is that all white people are racist. And if a white person denies that they're racist, they're suffering from what you call white fragility. And this is coming from Robin DiAngelo, who I should point out is a middle-aged white woman. And of course, what she's doing is, because she herself perceives herself to be racist, she just assumes that every other white person must automatically be racist. It sort of gives her a kind of excuse. And the book is absolutely terrible. And there is a serious side to this. I've got a chapter about Robin DiAngelo in Titania's new book, because the book is basically all of her heroes, chapter by chapter. You've got Robin DiAngelo, Meghan Markle, you've got Hillary Clinton and Joseph Stalin, you know, all the ones that she absolutely loves.
Fantastic.
And Robin DiAngelo's in there. When I wrote the book, because the book was written before all of this sort of kicked off, and someone said to me, but does anyone know who Robin DiAngelo is? And you've written this chapter on her, but they all do now. She's very big. But the real risk with it is that the book White Fragility is finding itself onto course curricula. It's even getting into schools. I've got friends who are teachers in the UK who are being told to read this. Employees at the BBC are being told to read this. Employees at corporations, HR departments. The book is terrible. It's really bad. I've read it twice. It's completely just this fraudulent form of academia that is just full of speculation dressed up as fact. And the problem is that people are interpreting it and applying it as though it is fact rather than theory. And that's what's really dangerous about it. It's going into policy. People are actually changing their curricula, their pastoral policies on the basis of what this woman says. And it's a real problem.
James.
Well, but it's not just Robin DiAngelo. I want to come back to this whole issue of the platform versus the publisher thing. There's also Ibrahim Kendi, who's got this other book out called How to Be an Anti-Racist, which is basically all of that critical race theory, which is the technical word for that wokeness that Titania so successfully lampoons. But Twitter and Jack, the founder of Twitter, has just given $10 million to Boston University's Ibrahim X. Kendi Center for something called Anti-Racist Studies. So don't things like that really further the case that platforms like Twitter are doing everything they can, not just to censor the very funny voices like you and Jarvis DuPont and the Babylon Bee, but also to really push a pretty sinister and, I would say, really racist and divisive agenda?
Yes, and the reason they can get away with it is because it's couched in this very positive-sounding language. You know, you say the word anti-racist and you think, well, that's great. What's wrong with being opposed to racism? Aren't we all opposed to racism? Well, yes, of course we are. That's not what anti-racism means when it comes from an academic. They're not talking about simply being opposed to racism. What they're talking about is acknowledging your own complicity in white supremacy and activating something against it. And that, of course, is very dangerous. What it does is it actually divides people up and sort of enforces a kind of a segregation. And I do think it's dangerous. And it is being pushed by major platforms like Twitter. This is why there's a chapter on Jack Dorsey in the book as well, because I wanted to explore this idea, the way in which that actually it's weird because it's the people, it's the corporations, it's the multimillionaires who are pushing this thing and behaving as though they're supporting the underdogs. But of course, that has never been the case. It's a very odd thing.
Yeah.
Well,
mentioning Jack Dorsey, sorry, Rowan, he is the CEO of Twitter. He's enormously powerful. And this week he gave $10 million donation to, I guess, the male black version of Robin DiAngelo, who also pushes this crazy theory that and you need to basically discriminate against white people to be truly anti-racist.
Yes, and he's just written another book which is aimed at children. It's called Antiracist Baby. And this book, I've seen it advertised because he's asked fans to send in photographs of their children holding the book, and some of them are babies, they're toddlers, and they've got sort of Black Lives Matter T-shirts on, and you think, oh, well, I'm sure that baby chose that themselves, didn't they? It's this incredible politicization of infants, and although you could say, you can point at that and you can laugh, which is what I do, there is something a little bit troubling about it as well.
Deeply disturbing, but thank God you're there to make us laugh. Andrew Doyle, Titania McGrath's new book coming out in a couple of weeks. We'll all be rushing out to buy that. Thanks so much, Andrew. Keep up the great work. Keep us smiling because we need all the smiles we can get at the moment. Thanks, mate.
Thanks a lot.